Thank you so much, Martin, for joining us today at the Dwelling Show. We really appreciate your time. We know you're super, super busy. It's actually 9 p.m. right now in London, in the UK. So we appreciate your time. Just a brief introduction. Martin Skinner is the founder and CEO of Inspired Asset Management. His experience with highs and lows of business and investments over the years, and remains a passionate advocate of small businesses, private investment, and property development in London. He's done, almost 500 million pounds in property development. So he's a true player over in the UK. But I'm sure, Martin, you could do a way better job than I can, and just tell our Dwell listeners a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to.
Hi, Ola. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having me on. Pleasure to be on the show. I guess I got into investing in property because I didn't like paying rent. I'm a bit of a petrol head, obsessed with cars, and all the rent that I had to pay when I first moved to university and out of my family home was a waste. I could have been putting that money into making my car go faster. So I started looking at ways that I could mitigate having to pay rent and ultimately start making money from investing in properties. And my very simple solution, which was also based on some research I did around what people could afford for their housing costs and what the market was actually providing, what it cost, was really just more efficient forms of housing, all really classified as micro these days. So my first solution was buying larger individual houses and then reconfiguring them and turning them into 5 or 6 bed house shares. So where the whole house or flat was unaffordable to the vast majority of the market initially, by reconfiguring it, adding bedrooms, each individual room was then affordable. So I initially delivered about 2,500 of those.
Wow.
Because I've got obsessive compulsive property purchasing disorder. But what started off as one house with 5 rooms in it, and I lived in one of those rooms, I turned into a much bigger business and portfolio. Initially, I built my buy-to-let portfolio. Then I started sourcing properties, refurbishing them, letting, managing and maintaining them for private clients, private investors. And ultimately, I started raising capital from private equity and really scaled the portfolio. Unfortunately, I lost that business in the credit crunch when my investors pulled out, didn't pay, and I had made the mistake of borrowing the money to keep paying everybody, and delivered everything, but it cost me everything.
Wow. Thank you so much for that introduction. That's a lot of stuff in there. So you started reconfiguring the houses that were not affordable on their own per, I guess, tenant or owner. So having 5 or maybe 4 people in a house was cheaper for the individual person. So were you the owner of some of, or maybe one of a few of those houses, and you had other people living with you at the time?
Yeah, so the first one I bought, then I remortgaged it and bought the second one, bought the third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one. I think I then quit the day job. There was about 6 houses. And while I was building my portfolio, I built portfolios that we managed for other private clients. And then ultimately, we had joint venture structures set up with the private equity and hedge fund groups. So we got paid to do all of the work, but then we got a profit share at the end as well, carried interest.
Right. So is that typically like what's that profit split usually like at the end?
We were on roughly an 80-20. So they would get 80% of the profit and we got 20. But after a sort of circa 8% per annum priority return. But then there were bigger, we got 40% if we beat a second tier of hurdles.
Okay.
These
Okay.
days, these days we tend to do it on either a 50-50 after a 10% per annum priority return, less if the risk is lower, more if the risk is higher, as in the priority return or preferred return.
Yeah, we call it preferred return here in the US.
Yeah. Or we just give investors a fixed return.
Right.
And typically we provide them some security, additional security, with a second charge or second lien, as you probably call it, I think, after the senior lender, the bank.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, I just want to kind of rewind back to the beginning. So what you were basically doing, here in the US is called house hacking. So you were house hacking with, some people at the time, and then you went to your second deal, to your third deal, all the way to the sixth, and then, like you said, you quit your job. So if I'm a listener right now and I'm in Bromley right now, in the gym somewhere, or even being Piccadilly Circus, and I'm like, wow, I love what Martin is talking about. I want to go out and I want to go do this. I mean, how feasible is this for someone in London to do this today?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. It's a little bit harder because the Bank of England has increased the sort of regulatory hurdles for lenders, and they've reduced the comfortable levels of leverage that they can provide and the cost of higher leverage. And of course, prices have gone up. Real house price inflation has been fairly significant in the 15 years that I've been doing this. And while rental inflation has been very high too, it's not been quite as high as house price inflation. So yields have come down, certainly in London. We're actually a little bit more focused outside London now than we are in. So we've gone regional or national. Initially, we started off in the sort of inner East London fringe areas like the Docklands and surrounding southeast, east and northeast London locations. Then we moved out to Greater London, areas like Sutton, Croydon, where else? We then moved out to sort of commuter London, areas like Crawley, Chertsey, Epsom.
Okay.
And now we've moved to sort of greater and commuter Manchester, greater and commuter Birmingham. We're starting to look at places like Leeds, Southampton, Bristol, etc. So we've gone national.
Wow, fantastic. Congratulations on that for sure. Congratulations on that. So now, you got the sixth property and then you decided to say, hey, I think this is a good time to quit the 9 to 5. How was that like for you and how did you come to that conclusion and why did you take that step? That I call it the step into the promised land, right?
I would say, aside from my wedding day and the birth of our son Jack, that day was probably the happiest day of my life.
I can relate. Can imagine.
The few years that followed that were fantastic because although I didn't have a huge amount of money, I had enough money to pay for anything within reason that I wanted. I didn't have to accept being told what to do every day. I had a lot more choice and freedom. And I was probably making about £5,000 a month. So I'd replaced my salary.
Awesome.
And I had more time and freedom on my hands. So it was great. Since I moved into development, I've thought many times, actually, I probably should have just stuck to what I did before. Because development's so stressful.
Wow. Okay, so
the numbers are big and the profits can be very substantial, but the risks are enormous, and it scares the pants off me every single time I do a big development now.
That's really interesting because a mentor of mine, he actually does multi-family apartment syndication deals here in the US, and is not a big fan of development. So I'm just kind of curious, just give us an example or something that really, apart from the risk, obviously, what really scares you about development? I mean, I'm not in development right now. I'm trying to become, but what scares you the most?
Yeah. Well, multi-unit scheme, so a number of apartments. You've got a lot of additional consultants, you've got a lot of additional regulation, you've got all of the services to put in. It's just so much more complicated. And if you've started with a residential unit in the first place, you can typically get it into an income generating form quite quickly. Whereas if you are creating multiple homes, there's quite a long process to go through there before you can generate any income from it, and before you can really justify a value of any significance from it, because a half-built building is not really worth anything.
Correct.
You've got to finish it.
Oh wow! Okay, that's definitely good to know. That's so. Would you typically?
But don't do what I do, people. It's too scary.
So, what would be kind of your advice then for somebody, a young chap looking at your profile online, they want to get into real estate? If you were to kind of go through this again, what do you think you'd be doing in the real estate sphere?
I think co-living is a very exciting space to be in. Although almost by definition, it does involve development. So I would say co-living would be more of a destination rather than the starting point.
Okay.
I kind of helped another property developer, an investor, Reza Merchant, to do that with his business, The Collective. So he started off by renting houses and subletting the rooms, which is quite an effective way of getting started if you don't really have any money and you can't afford to buy the assets. He then moved into buying individual houses and renting out the rooms. Then he started progressing on into development and building up a lot of student style, higher quality studios and cluster flats. But I think if someone was just starting out, I would say buy a one-bedroom flat with its own kitchen, with its own window, put the kitchen in the living room, you've gained an extra bedroom. Suddenly you've got a two-bedroom flat. That, I think, is a very easy way to make a decent capital gain and increase the rental from the property relatively easily. Don't forget you've got building regulations, fire regulations, and potentially freeholder consents to consider. But that's a very easy, relatively low risk way to get started.
Yeah, I definitely have seen The Collective online when I was doing some research. And there's also a company called, I think it's called Common in the US. I think you have in like the big metropolitan sort of section of the cities. So like DC, New York, and it's pretty much similar to what Raza is doing. So I think I've seen that. It's kind of how the market is forcing us to create value, like Uber is forcing the cab industry to rethink how value is created and Airbnb. So that's definitely interesting.
Driving efficiency through what is typically a relatively inefficient industry. Yeah.
Right.
Getting a premium return, while at the same time making the homes more affordable for individual people. Yeah.
So we're definitely dwelling into the quick round. So these are going to be quick questions and quick answers, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So what would you say makes you, Martin Skinner, unique? What's that differentiating trait or factor that makes you different from the next guy or the next girl?
Stubbornness, persistence.
That is funny. Okay.
That's probably about it. And, it was a pretty basic innovation that I came up with. Smaller units are smaller private spaces, and larger shared spaces are a more efficient way to deliver the accommodation solution. And I've just kept going at it despite whatever hits me.
It's all about perseverance, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's funny.
You can't lose if you don't give up.
That is the trick. Persist until you succeed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Second question. What was the last book that you read, and what was the one thing that you learned from the book?
I read the psychopath test. and I learned that most of the people in power around the world are basically nuts.
Yeah.
If I might add a second one, apparently because I started worrying that I might be a psychopath as I was halfway through the book then said, if you're reading this and starting to worry that you might be a psychopath, don't worry, you're not. If you were, you wouldn't be worried about it. So hopefully that means I'm not a psychopath.
Now I want to read that book.
Great book.
I want to read that book. Oh man, Martin, you've got a fantastic sense of humor. Last question is basically, I mean, you've just kept me going. What do you do for fun? You got a lot of stuff going. Development is driving you crazy. How'd you blow some steam off?
Well, as I said, I'm a total petrol head. So I like to race cars around tracks if I can. Unfortunately, these days I don't seem to be allowed on the track very often.
How come?
Or I put my car up on the way there or back, or I just crash it in traffic at 2 miles an hour like I did yesterday.
Wow.
They wouldn't let me on the track last time in my car. It was too noisy, which was very annoying. And then it did blow up on the way home. So I need a new engine in that car now.
Wow. Awesome.
I
so
more money from property to pay for it.
So if I'm somebody, interested in investing, but I'm like, man, I don't know if I have this persistency or this perseverance Martin is talking about, but I got some money. How can people find you? How can people reach out to you? And how can people do business with Inspired Asset?
We're always looking for more deals and we're always looking for more investors. So go to inspiredassets.com, inquire through there so we can make sure that you're in the right category to invest with us and through which mechanism. Follow us on social media. Follow me on social media. Facebook.com/Martin Skinner. It's Twitter.com/Martin Skinner. Instagram.com/ maybe it's Martin_Skinner.
I'll have those in the show notes.
Or drop me an email, martin@inspiredassets.com.
What a legend. Thank you so much, sir. I learned so much and I laughed a lot. Definitely one day, we got to basically, when I get back home to London, we have to meet up and we can talk some shop and just laugh at each other's craziness and, how we keep going, even though we get stuff thrown at us in the real estate world, get punched in the belly over and over again. So.
Okay. One final thing.
Yes.
We sell our flats as well through www.inspiredhomes.uk.com.
Okay.
Remember that, right? .uk. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to talk with you. Thanks, Ola.
Thank you so much.
And, I wish you all the best with your business as well. Looks like that's going phenomenally well too.
Yeah. So we'll keep. Thank you, sir. We'll keep pushing through.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate.
All right.
Cheers. Bye.
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 Oh.